Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. In this video series, we'll create this keyboard in Blender from scratch. Now we'll create not only the outside of the keyboard, but some of the internal components as well, so we can make an exploded view render similar to these. In this first episode, we'll model the bottom of the case. As you can see, there's quite a few smaller details we have to model. One thing to note, we will not use the subdivision modifier in this episode. The reason for this is a very rectangular shape with mostly 90-degree sharp edges. This also means that topology won't matter as much, and creating tris and n-gons won't really affect the end result. Still, we'll try to stick to quads as much as possible. First thing with any modeling project is collecting reference. For this, I recommend you download an app called PureRef. It's an amazing tool for quickly collecting reference images. It's easy to use, and it makes collecting reference images a lot quicker. You can download it for free, but if you find it useful and can afford it, make sure to come back here to support the developers. Make sure to also get some images from a top, front, and side view if possible, so later we can add it to our scene. Once we have enough reference images, we can open up Blender and get started. First step, delete the default cube and add a better one. Now we can add our reference images. Once you import them, press N and set all rotation to 0. Rotate and move them in place and bring down the opacity in the Data tab. Repeat for all of the images you want to import. Now instead of scaling our cube to match the reference images, we can go to the website and check the dimensions of our keyboard. Input these measures in the Item Dimensions menu. And scale your reference images to match your object. Now we can cut our keyboard in half, add a loop cut, and slide it until the edges match the reference. Now we can highlight the top half of the mesh and separate it. Now we can add bevel to our object, but first apply scale. Go with a fairly high number of segments, as we want to use subdivision modifier to smooth out the curve. We won't need these side faces, so we can just delete them. Now we can add a solidify modifier. Set the offset to 1, as we want the thickness to be on the inside, and set the thickness to something low. Add a mirror modifier. Put an edge loop in the middle and delete half of the mesh. Check the clipping option and apply the solidify modifier. Now we can start working on the details we see in our reference image. Add a loop cut around the edge and extrude the top face. Now to model the side of the bottom half, we'll need to reconstruct some geometry. Pretty useful technique that we'll end up using quite a bit during this episode. Add some loop cuts, select the inside faces, separate them, move them a bit up, scale it to 0 in the Z-axis, and join the geometry back. We can snap the vertices at end of this strip to the main body. Select 4 vertices and press F to turn it into a face. After the first face, you can just select 2 vertices and keep pressing F. The position of this whole edge is not correct, but we can fix that later. For now, we'll just move it up so we can connect it to the rest of the mesh. If we want to straighten the top of this section, we can add an edge across this whole section, select the two opposite vertices, and press F. Change the snapping mode to edge, and move these vertices on the Z-axis to that edge. Delete the edge we created previously. One last thing, we can space these vertices out by selecting them and picking space from the Loop Tools menu. Loop Tools is a very useful built-in add-in that we'll keep using during this tutorial. If you don't see this menu, go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ins, and search for Loop Tool. We also need to merge the vertices we snapped together earlier. Since we don't have a top-down view of the inside of the keyboard, it's hard to get the position and size of these things right. Try to go with something that looks right. It doesn't have to be perfect. To create these square protrusions, I'm adding edge loops and beveling them with one segment to define the width of the walls. Since we'll eyeball the proportions, we can add a plane to act as a guide for our eyeballs. I'll add 10 loop cuts to create 11 segments, just like in the reference. Adjust the width of this section until the edge of your last loop cut lines up with the square. Now we can use the same square to eyeball match the width of the newly added loop cuts. We'll deal with this part after we apply the mirror modifier. We need to fix this part, as right now it's not connected properly. Add a loop cut to the side so we have extra vertices to snap to. And once again, we'll reconstruct the geometry. Now we can copy the mesh we created to the top of the keyboard. Add loop cuts and snap them to the edges of the copied mesh. You can hover over at the copied mesh and press L to select the whole island. Hide it so we can delete the unnecessary faces under it. To make sure that our topology is okay, go to Select All by Trait, Interior Faces. The selected faces can be deleted. The square protrusion on the top side should be taller. Select a face on the top, go to Select Similar, Coplanar, and deselect the unnecessary faces. Now we add the place for the feet. Delete these faces, and once again, we'll reconstruct the geometry. I'll dissolve these vertices so we can create quads here as well. Move these edges closer so we have more space for a bevel, and bevel this edge. Now we can delete this face to create some of the most awful looking quads. This step is not only optional, but also makes no difference in the final model. Now we are creating some more smaller details with the same technique. Add loop cuts, delete faces, and reconstruct geometry. To create the place for the screws, we'll need to add quite a lot of loop cuts to create a grid of vertices. We can select this grid and turn it into a circle by picking the circle option from the Loop Tools menu. Make sure to delete the vertices on the inside. We won't need these. Now we just extrude and scale the edge. Now we can highlight the created mesh and copy it to a new location. Add the loop cuts to the edges and also add the extra loop cuts. Hide the mesh, delete the underlying unnecessary faces, reconnect the copied mesh. Now we can bevel this edge and once again reconstruct the geometry to create these bridges. Apply the mirror modifier and delete these middle faces. Also make sure to delete the interior faces again. Now we'll just fix this middle part. And with that, our model is complete. That wraps up our first episode in this series. I hope you found this tutorial helpful and that you learned something new. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content. If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to leave a comment below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.